My name is Clarice Holloway. I'm 68 years old now, a grandmother, a gardener, a woman with silver hair and a voice people say brings comfort. But the comfort I give came at a cost, forged in silence, pain, and years of hiding the truth. It all began in 1963. I was only 11 years old, living in a tiny farmhouse in rural Kentucky. My mother had remarried the year before to a man named Carl. He was a mechanic, gruff, short-tempered, and always reeking of oil and beer. I had an older brother too, Thomas. He was 15, angry, and distant. After our dad passed, something in him turned cold. Mama used to smile. Before Carl came. Before everything changed. I didn't understand then why I was so afraid to bathe. Why the sound of the door creaking open made my heart seize. But I remember clearly, the day everything fell apart was a Sunday. I had been scrubbing behind my ears in the clawfoot tub, humming to myself softly. The water was warm. Safe. Until the lock turned with a click. And that's where my voice disappeared. I remember the sound. The creak of the old wooden door. The sharp metallic click of the lock sliding open. I froze. My small body sank lower into the warm water, instinctively trying to hide beneath the fading soap suds. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the porcelain tub to swallow me whole. Tommy? I called out, my voice small. Is that you? No answer. Footsteps. Heavy ones. It wasn't my brother. It wasn't Mama either. It was him, Carl. My stepfather. I clutched the rag I'd been using to wash, trying to cover myself. I was just a child, still unsure of what was happening in my own body, but I knew. I knew this wasn't right. I had learned to dread the way his eyes scanned me, like I was something he owned. Something he could take. He leaned against the doorframe, his yellowed teeth pressing together in a smirk that made my stomach twist. His voice, thick with whiskey, slithered out of his throat. You missed a spot, he chuckled. I shrank back. I wish I could say I screamed. That I fought. But I didn't. I couldn't. That moment splintered time itself, and all I could do was tremble, terrified and ashamed. Carl came closer, each step echoing like thunder in my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut and wished for the world to end. But it didn't. He touched me. And from that moment forward, I never bathed without fear again. The next few days passed in a blur. Mama didn't ask why I stopped singing. Why I flinched when she hugged me. She didn't ask why I'd cry silently in bed at night, curled in a ball, holding on to the little stuffed bunny Daddy gave me before he died. Maybe she knew. Maybe she chose not to know. But what made it worse, what tore my soul apart, was what happened next. It was my brother. Thomas. He was supposed to protect me. One afternoon, I was home alone. Or so I thought. The pipes had been rattling, so Mama told me to bathe early before the water turned cold. I obeyed like a good girl. I tried to be good. Maybe if I was good enough, it would stop. I was soaking in silence when I heard the door creak. Again. I froze. My skin crawled. But it wasn't Carl. It was Thomas. His eyes were different that day. Cold. Unreadable. Not like a brother's eyes should be. Tommy. I whispered, clutching my rag again. What are you doing? He shut the door. Turned the lock. Don't tell Mama, he said, voice flat. She won't believe you anyway. That day, I lost everything I ever thought I had. Trust. safety, family. The water in that tub turned cold. It would never be warm again, not for years. When it was over, I wrapped myself in a towel and sat on the floor, shaking. I stared at the chipped white paint on the wall and promised myself 3 things. I would survive. I would protect any child who crossed my path. One day, I would make them regret ever touching me. I became quiet. Withdrawn. I stopped smiling. I stopped looking people in the eyes. Mama thought I was just growing up. Didn't all girls get moody around that age? No, Mama. I wasn't growing up. I was being destroyed. Mama used to hum while she cooked, soft gospel songs she learned from her own mother. The smell of fried okra and cornbread filled the air, and you'd think, for a moment, that this was a normal home. But Mama's eyes were where the lie lived. They weren't warm anymore. They were tired, distant, always darting away from the truth. After what Thomas did, I didn't speak to him. Not a word. Not even a glance. I avoided being alone in any room. I learned how to hear footsteps 3 doors away, how to gauge time by the slant of sunlight through the window so I'd never be in the bathroom when he might come home. Mama noticed something. She asked, "Clarice, why don't you talk to your brother?" I wanted to scream. Because he took something from me you refused to protect. But I said nothing. She squinted at me over the frying pan, like she was trying to read a foreign language on my face. Then, as quickly as she asked, she dropped it. Because deep down, she knew. She knew the same way she knew about Carl's habits. About the way he'd stare too long at me. The way he'd put his hand on my back and leave it there too long. She chose not to know. It's strange how women like Mama survive by looking away. As if their silence makes them monsters less real. But for the rest of us? That silence was a coffin. I turned 14 that winter. No party. No cake. Just an awkward hug from Mama and a pat on the back from Carl that made my skin crawl. I got a second-hand sweater as a gift. It still smelled like someone else's perfume. That night, Carl came home late. Drunk. I heard him arguing with Mama in the kitchen. Slurred words. Breaking glass. Then silence. Then the door creaked open again. He came into my room. I don't remember all the details. Just the feeling of my body floating outside of itself. My mind split into pieces, retreating somewhere, anywhere else. My hands clutched the edge of the mattress so hard I thought they'd snap off. When he was done, he whispered, "Don't tell your Mama. She needs me." I lay there for hours after he left. In the darkness. In the silence. My mind repeating, "She needs me. She needs me." What about me? At school, I was a ghost. I sat in the back. I didn't raise my hand. I wore clothes too big for me, trying to disappear into the seams. But one day, Mrs. Emerson, the school counselor, called me in. She said a teacher noticed my eyes looked swollen. My hands were trembling. I shrugged it off. I was taught to hide. To survive, not speak. She offered me tea, a warm smile. She said, "Sometimes things happen at home that feel too heavy for a young girl to carry. You don't have to carry it alone." I looked up at her then. Really looked. And for a split second, I almost told her everything. But the voice of my stepfather rang in my head, "She needs me. She needs me." So I lied. I said I had allergies. That my baby brother kept me up all night. That I was just stressed about math. She nodded. Wrote something down. Told me to come back if I ever wanted to talk. I never did. But something in her eyes stayed with me. Maybe, one day, I would. It was on a Wednesday night that I found it, Mama's old prayer journal. She had left it under her pillow. I wasn't snooping. I was just making the bed. Flipping through, I saw scribbles. Ramblings. Begging God for strength. For mercy. For forgiveness. But then, one page stopped me cold. I heard Clarice cry again last night. Carl's boots weren't by the door. I don't know what to do. I need him to pay rent. But I don't want to lose her. Lord, what am I supposed to do? She knew. She knew. My throat clenched. I dropped the journal like it burned. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the choice. My own mother had weighed me against a man's paycheck, and I lost. I curled into a ball in the closet that night and sobbed without a sound. That was the moment I stopped being her daughter. That was the moment I became a stranger in my own home. The turning point came not from Carl. It came from Mama. One morning, I refused to hand Carl the coffee mug. I just stood there, silent. He gave me a look. Walked away. Said nothing. But Mama slapped me. Hard. Right across the cheek. My head snapped sideways. You don't disrespect a man in this house, she hissed. I stared at her, stunned. Not because of the pain. I'd felt worse. But because the last flicker of hope, that maybe she'd wake up, maybe she'd protect me, died right then. I walked to my room. Locked the door. And made a vow. I will leave this house. I will survive. And one day, I will make them regret every second of what they've done to me. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was war. In the quiet of my locked bedroom, I started a notebook. I didn't call it a diary. Diaries are for secrets. This was my evidence. Each night, after Carl stumbled out of my room or Mama turned off the TV without a word, I wrote down every detail. Date. Time. What he did. What he said. How I felt. I wrote until my hand cramped. It was the only thing I controlled in that house, my truth. The pages became thicker. The secrets louder. And in the pages, I found something unexpected, clarity. Each sentence sharpened my resolve. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining this. It was real. All of it. And one day, someone would read it. And they would believe me. One evening, Carl forgot to lock the front door. He was drunk, more than usual. I could hear him snoring on the couch like a dying engine. I looked at the door. Open. The outside world, dark, yes, but free. I grabbed my notebook. My school bag. Slipped out silently. The night air kissed my skin like a prayer. I walked. And walked. It must have been 2 miles before I saw the gas station lights. The clerk inside, a woman named Tasha, asked me if I was okay. I told her I was just walking home late from a friend's. She looked at my bruised wrist. Didn't press. Just nodded and said, "Well, you got 5 minutes before I lock up. Want a water bottle?" That kindness? It hit me harder than any punch Carl ever gave. I made it back home before sunrise. Carl never woke. Mama never noticed. But I noticed something. I could survive without them. I could walk 2 miles in the dark. I could lie to a stranger and still feel human. I could feel kind eyes and not flinch. That night taught me more than any teacher ever could. Pain isn't the end. Silence isn't safety. And fear is just the first step before freedom. The next morning, I looked at Carl in the eye when he passed me in the hallway. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt angry. Not the weak kind. Not panic. The kind that plants its roots and waits to burn. I started arriving early to school. The library opened at 7 a.m. sharp, and it became my shelter. I'd sit in the far corner, next to the window, notebook tucked under my sweater. I wasn't reading for class anymore. I was reading about legal age, reporting abuse, evidence, and what happens when no one believes you. The more I read, the more I understood, the world wasn't fair, especially not for girls like me. But knowledge? Knowledge could be my weapon. One day, Miss Patton, my English teacher, caught me alone. "You're reading court documents?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I didn't answer. She sat beside me. "You don't have to tell me anything. But if you ever need help, I'm here. No questions. Just help." Her hand gently touched my wrist. And I broke. Not loudly. Just one tear. But it was the first time I didn't feel crazy. Mama changed after Carl put her in the hospital. It was a Thursday. He said she fell in the kitchen. But I saw the swelling. The way she avoided mirrors. She didn't yell anymore. Just walked around like a ghost. Like she'd finally realized what she let into our home. One night, I caught her staring at me from the hallway. No words. Just guilt. I wanted to scream at her. But what came out was quieter. "You let him do this to me." She blinked, but didn't deny it. "I was 15, I said." "I know," she whispered. And that was it. Not an apology. Just 3 words that came 5 years too late. I wrote Carl a letter. Not to send. Just to purge. "Dear Carl, I hope you know that every scar you left made me sharper. Every time you laughed while I cried, I built armor. You thought you could silence me forever. But you were wrong. I'm not your victim anymore. I'm not even angry anymore. I'm colder than that. I'm calculating. I'm remembering. I'm recording. One day, someone will knock on your door. And you'll hear my voice in their questions. My truth in their evidence. And you'll know your time has come. Yours never again. Clarice." I folded it. Burned it over the stove while Mama slept. But in my heart, I mailed it. Every single word. It was time for me to take control. The quiet years spent in fear, feeling helpless, were finally giving way to something new. I wasn't just waiting anymore. I wasn't just enduring. I had started to plan. I started small. Learning what I could about the law. About victims' rights. About what it meant to be empowered. I found people who could help, even when I didn't know how to ask for it. My first stop was an online support group, where survivors of abuse shared their stories. Some spoke in hushed tones, others in rage. I saw their faces, some with smiles, some with tears. But they were all surviving. It was in one of those meetings that I saw a post from a local lawyer offering free consultations. I saved his number. I wasn't ready to call yet, but I couldn't ignore the fact that someone would listen. I continued gathering evidence. Journal entries. Old photos. Recorded conversations where Carl made his threats, his lies. I even found an old voicemail from my brother, a drunk rambling, his voice thick with shame. It was the nail in the coffin. My brother was just as complicit. It came to a head on a Friday night in late September. Mama had been home from the hospital for a few weeks, and things were tense. The house always felt too quiet now, like everyone was afraid of waking up to the truth. I had been hiding behind my books, trying to avoid Carl's eyes. But it was getting harder. That night, I was in my room, organizing the papers I'd been gathering, when I heard a familiar creak in the hallway. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. Carl. He didn't knock. He just entered. "What are you doing?" His voice was rough, eyes red from drinking. "Just thinking," I said, my back to him. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. Not like before. He moved closer, standing in the doorway. "You're smarter than I thought. But that won't save you." "You should be careful what you think you know," he muttered, stepping forward. I felt a chill slide down my spine. His breath was heavy with alcohol, but it was something else that froze me, the promise in his words. The threat. "I'm done being scared of you," I said softly. He chuckled. "You don't know how deep this runs, girl." I stood up, my legs shaking, but my resolve was steel. "I'm not that girl anymore, Carl. You're going to pay for what you've done." His face went pale, the color draining from his cheeks. "You think so?" He took another step forward, his eyes narrowing. "You wouldn't dare. Your little game ends here." I didn't wait for him to move. I turned toward my closet, pulling out the papers, everything I had gathered, my proof. "Actually," I said, holding up the file, "I'm just getting started." The next few days were a whirlwind. My hands shook as I called the lawyer from that online post, setting up a meeting for the following morning. But as soon as I hung up, I realized something. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about breaking free. It was about saving Mama, too. She'd been trapped in this nightmare for so long, with Carl controlling every move she made. I needed her to see it. To see that we could escape. Together. That night, I stayed up late, working on my plans. Mama came into my room. "Clarice," she said, her voice small, tired. "What's going on? You've been so different lately." I paused, searching her eyes. Her face was full of fear, but beneath that, I could see the spark I knew was there all along. She wanted out, too. "Mama, you have to trust me," I said, pulling the papers from my bag and handing them to her. "I'm not going to let him hurt us anymore." She didn't say anything for a long time. She just held the papers in her hands and stared at them like they were a lifeline. Finally, she whispered, "I've been so scared, Clarice. But I know. I know now it's time. It's time for us to leave." It was then I knew that we could finally escape. And Carl would never see it coming. By the time I met the lawyer, my heart was hammering in my chest. The weight of the truth hung over me like a storm cloud, but I didn't feel afraid. I felt empowered. The lawyer's office was small, tucked away in a back corner of the city. He was an older man, mid-50s, but he had a calm presence. As soon as I walked in, he stood up and shook my hand. I could see the concern in his eyes, but also something else, respect. "You're here for more than just yourself, aren't you?" he said. I nodded. "I'm here for my mom. And for my brother. But I need to make sure they can't hurt us anymore." We went over my evidence, everything I'd collected, including the phone calls and recordings, and his face grew more serious as the hours passed. This is solid, he said at last. We can build a case. But you need to understand, it won't be easy. People like Carl, they fight dirty. I'm ready, I said, a steady resolve building inside me. The next weeks were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and preparing for the storm that was coming. I could feel it building, a pressure in the air like the calm before the battle. Carl knew something was off. He didn't trust me anymore, but he didn't know exactly what I was planning. One night, when he was gone, I packed our things. Clothes, important documents, anything we could take without drawing attention. It wasn't enough to escape. We needed to be gone before he realized we'd slipped through his fingers. Mama helped me, her hands shaking but determined. For the first time in years, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen since I was a child, hope. The final legal battle came to a head a few months later. Carl tried to fight the charges with everything he had, but the evidence was undeniable. My brother, too, was held accountable for his actions. For the first time in my life, I saw justice. But more than that, I saw the healing that was possible. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I was looking forward to it. As I sat with Mama in the park one sunny afternoon, watching the trees sway and the kids play, I realized that what we had been through had shaped us into something new, stronger, braver, more resilient. It was a long road ahead, but we were no longer prisoners in our own lives. The worst was behind us, and I could finally feel the freedom I had longed for. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe for more inspirational stories.